These 3 decks got me into Speed Duels, and you're about to find out exactly what they are.
Wait, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, because that helps me upload more videos and know that you like content like this.
Hey everyone, this is Jesse from Janjo, from the Janjo Zone. I got this new setup near my computer that I just set up. So hopefully you'll seeing more videos like this where I'm on camera a little bit more often. Hopefully reduces some of the fancy editing that really takes me a lot of time to do, which I do like doing. You'll certainly see that in series like my Dual Sauce Yu-Gi-Oh! History series. But for other kind of discussions, I like to be on camera to do more stuff like this. So I want to come on camera to talk about Speed Duels. Now, Speed Duels is something I've so far never talked about on my channel. I do really like Speed Duels. I like when they first announced it. I thought it was kind of interesting. At first I thought it was just you take all the cards you normally had and played a abridged version of it. I thought that was interesting, but then they announced that they're going to have their own card pool for that. I was like, okay, we'll see how it is. And they released a lot of interesting cards, nothing too powerful. You know, they had a lot of smaller cards at first. A lot of the early sets, you didn't have too many meta things. The most meta decks at the time when the game started was Gravekeepers, and there was one other one, I know for sure, like Warriors type of deck, I'm pretty sure. But it was really cool to see that, hey, this is a new kind of way to play the game. This has a whole new card pool, whole new set of rules. But the problem is that Konami never really supported it. They never really had much tournaments, and just the amount of support they kept giving it in terms of the card pool, it wasn't really enough. Because for the last year or so, we've had the same meta in Dark Moth decks mostly. But there's a lot of really interesting decks that arose from Speed Duels and just in Speed Duels, and I think that's really, really interesting because you're not going to see that in the TCG or the OCG, and I want to talk about some of the decks that really made me fall in love with Speed Duel. So let's get started. So the first one I want to talk about is, well, if you can see the background behind my mic stand, Serpentine Dragon. Yeah, Serpentine Dragon. I've always liked this card because it's a really weird looking dragon. It's like this serpentine looking thing, and there's not really any other dragons that look quite like that. A lot of them look more like the European dragons or just straight up Chinese dragons. This thing, I don't even know how to describe it. It's weird, but I've always really liked it. But in terms of the card game, it really was just its own thing. Yeah, sure, it was Rex Raptor's boss monster, at least one of them, alongside Red Eyes. But that was about it. There was nothing to help him be in any decks. There's no support. There was better vanilla dragons, and it was really nothing. So when they released the Rex Raptor deck, they released his own skill card for Serpentine Dragon. That was Nightmare Sonic Blast. And that was crazy for me to think that they made this Serpentine Dragon deck in Speed Duels. It's something that would not exist outside of it unless they ever decide to actually make support in the future. Make Nightmare Sonic Blast an actual card, which I'd be down for. I'd be down for more Serpentine Dragon cards. I love that they took this one card that otherwise was just a cool looking vanilla with nothing else, and they made him his own thing, his own strategy that was unique to him and that fit the whole kind of look of it. This makes me want to see more skills like this, or more support to these kind of vanilla monsters, these old ones that are kind of lost in the ether of just, you know, forgettable cards. Because Serpentine Dragon, he was a secret rare in Metal Raiders. Like, that's a big slot for a card to have, and to see absolutely nothing was just insane. So I love that they gave him his own thing. I want to see more cards get skills like this, to have more of their own decks, like Seari or Horizonryu, some of those vanilla dragon cards. I love this. What really made me fall in love with Speed Duels. This was like the big deck for me when they had it. I'm like, oh my god, you can have this in this format and it works. You can win games with this. It's not a crappy deck, you know. People can play with it. Sure, it's not top tier meta, but it's still a decent threat. And I just love Serpentine Dragon for that. So that's definitely one of the cards that made me fall in love with this game. So the second deck I want to talk about is Gravekeeper Burn. Now, Gravekeepers, I've been playing since GOAT format. It is one of, if not, probably is, my favorite archetype in the entire series. I love the heavy Egyptian themes for it. I love that its main card, Necro Valley, will remain powerful throughout Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's such a powerful stoppage, considering how much graveyard play has come into the game. I've always loved Gravekeepers. They've had their strategy, they had their shtick. You know, you can play them in GOAT formats, you can play them in modern formats, which with their own new support. But in Speed Duels, they do have the regular Gravekeepers cards, and that's really cool, especially that it was meta when the game first came out, because there's a lot of good cards in them. But what really made me like it a lot more, especially in Speed Duels, is the spice. You know, I love the spice, and Gravekeeper Burn was a pretty formidable deck that they released. And I thought that was really awesome. Well, I really should say release, but things that people made out of using cards like Gravekeeper's Curse and Chief and Rite of Spirit, using those kind of cards to burn your opponent's life points because, well, you didn't have that much life points in Speed Duels. It was only 4,000. So burn decks inherently got a buff. Now, there's other kinds of burn decks out there, but Gravekeeper one was the spicy one for me because it took an archetype that already existed and created an entirely new way to play it. You don't normally see that, especially to this degree. There are some archetypes that, sure, they may get a different variation, but it's more of just a, hey, look what I did, kind of not viable whatsoever. Gravekeepers Burn is a deck you go, okay, all right, I see. And it just, when you look at how it works, it's really cool to see just how it does that. Because it uses cards that have existed, people know about this, but it works because it's in Speed Duels. And like Serpentine Dragon, this is something that exists because of this specific format, this rule. I don't know really what... Is Speed Duel considered a format? I guess it is. But yeah, it's really cool that I love that because it gives you another way to play Gravekeepers, and I am all for that. Now, before I talk about the last deck, I want you all to let me know what are your favorite decks in Speed Duels, what decks really made you fall in love with Speed Duels, and if you want to see more Speed Duel content, definitely let me know and leave a like, because the more likes I get, the more I know, along with the comments, that you want to see kind of Speed Duel content. 'Cause I like Speed Duels, I feel like it doesn't get enough love, and I just want to talk about it more, so I can spread the love around. And there's plenty of places to talk about it, whether it's on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy Discord or other great Speed Duel Yu-Gi-Tubers like Avault, Curse of yugioh. You know, a lot of great people. So yeah, let me know. And I do want to talk about some decks real quick that I absolutely love that didn't make my top 3, but I still love regardless. One would be some of the ritual decks. I love that there's a Fortress Whale deck. I love that they actually reprinted Fortress Whale, which is another reason why I love Speed Duels, is for the reprints, because beforehand, he was a Fortress Whale, was a Torment Pack card, and it was crazy expensive. And it was absurd because Fortress Whale is a crappy card. It's just a vanilla ritual with not great stats, and it was bizarre. So I was really happy that they reprinted that along with, you know, other cards like Mimicat, Parrot Dragon, you know, just weird cards. Fortress Whale, I love that because it's not a great deck, but the fact that they re-released it and people can play it is so fun, and I love that. And the other ritual deck I want to talk about is Chaos Ritual with the Ritual of Chaos Mastery, whatever the skill card is called, where it's a ritual deck that you can incorporate both Blackluster Soldier and Magician of Black Chaos. And I love that there's a deck that exists that incorporates those two vanilla ritual monsters from Duelist Kingdom, and that's really, really cool. I love that. There's some other decks I love. Like there's a normal beatdown deck that's pretty cheeky. You just use a bunch of strong normal monsters and Heatwave, another great reprinted card in Speed Duels, and you just beat down your opponent. And there's a bunch of other decks, which I'm sure I'll show on here. Yeah, the last one I want to mention in my honorable mention ones would be Kairushin. I love this Kairushin deck. I love water decks. I think they're really cool, whether it's Mermail or Legendary Fisherman from 2003 or Levia Dragon Daedalus, which is one of my favorite decks in all of Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is in Speed Duels too. But the Kairushin deck's really cool because it takes a card that I don't think was even released previously in the TCG and created its own very unique playstyle regarding constantly bringing back Yumi and like boosts, water monsters, and it's really interesting. And similar to Serpentine Dragon, they took a card that was otherwise very crappy and they turn it into its own interesting archetype with its own playstyle, and that's really, really cool. You know, there's other decks that use cards that you wouldn't see otherwise in the TCG or GOAT formats, like Zombie Master, that deck, or like a Thousand Eyes Restrict deck. You know, like there's kind of decks that they use older cards in new ways, and it's only in Speed Duels you can get stuff like that, and I love it. So the third deck I want to talk about, with that long intermission between the second deck and this deck, definitely has to be Spellproof Machines. Now, while I love Heavy Metal Raiders, it's my online player name, and like the Dark Machine deck in the TCG, even though it's not really that good, but just the Heavy Metal Raiders card I love, so it's worth it for me. But Spellproof Machines is the one that I love, because again, while there's Heavy Metal Raiders as a skill card, Spellproof Machine, what it does is it lets you play a lot of the crappy, high-level, low attack stat machine monsters that Banner Keith is infamous for having from Duelist Kingdom. If you play games like Legacy of the Duelist, you'll notice that his deck will still have these cards, so he is forced to play Mausoleum of the Emperor, which is just, he keeps draining his life points away to summon these cards, and you think to yourself, God, this is really bad for him, because these monsters he summons aren't worth the effort, aren't worth the life points. And what Spellproof Machine does is that it gives these monsters a buff, but also makes them a lot more summonable because they reduce their levels. Similar to the decks I mentioned before, which is what I love, is taking older cards, whether they're have seen no play or weren't worth playing, and make them playable nowadays. I love that they took these whole bunch of crappy machine monsters and they made it its own thing that you never saw otherwise. Now, obviously, this list isn't in any specific order, but Spellproof Machines, I love. It made me fall in love with Speed Duel. Also, you can play cards that, like, they look cool. You know, I love to play Pendulum Machine, and you can use them in this, and that's really awesome. And I think that's kind of the point of this whole video, is that I want to see Speed Duels continue. Now, will it continue after 2020? I don't know. There's been a lot of, I don't want to say drama, maybe, I guess, speculation that it might be fading out because one of the guys who runs it is leaving Konami. Konami is coming out with Rush Duels, which is similar in concept, so they might want to push that instead. And it's really sad to see, because Konami kind of didn't really support Speed Duels, and they're like, well, it's not doing super well, but I love Speed Duels because it's a new way to play the games, different way. You have a whole different card pool. You can use so much more obscure cards, so much more underutilized cards, and really be super inventive. There's even more gimmicked formats where people play a bunch of cards that aren't even in the format at all, just to see how it works. There's a whole expanded thing going on with a bunch of other Yu-Gi tubers with crazy new cards, like more Red Eyes cards or more Gaia cards, and it's, you know, the fans are really trying to keep this Speed Duel format alive, and I want to see it because I want to see Konami release more support for this instead of fans just making their own, because hey, maybe I'll try and make a Seiryu archetype or something, you know, some sort of Speed Duel deck with that, or like more Nephthys support, or, you know, just crazy things that you can only see in this one thing that wouldn't be in the TCG. It's its own separate thing, own way to play. It's fun. It's a very fast kind of a game. It's very minimalistic, which, you know, is a popular design choice in this modern era. You know, a lot of crunching decks down into the most like purest form, and just skill cards are really fun. You know, reminds me of Deck Masters from that one season of Yu-Gi-Oh. You know, I want to see more stuff like that. I want to see way more things. God, can you imagine like elemental heroes in Speed Duels? That'd be kind of weird. I'm just thinking about possible things we could see, and you know, I love to see more of that. And the decks I mentioned is really what made me fall in love, and I'm hoping we can see more of that, more people support it, and more cards released by Konami, so the only meta we see isn't just Dark Moth / Zoma Nightmare Wheel, you know? So let me know what you think about this video, about the decks I mentioned. Let me know what decks you like, and if you would like to see more Speed Duel content, or if there's any specific kind of Yu-Gi-Oh content in general you want to see from me. I'm most likely probably willing to listen to it, probably gonna do it, you know, we'll see. This extra sauce version of Duel Sauce is kind of whatever I feel like doing, so yeah. You know, obviously follow me on all these social media, stuff I kind of have to say, you know, my Discord, Twitter, all that fun jazz. So, of course, until then, have a wonderful day.